Welcome to this recap of the new features of Swift and SwiftUI that Apple announced at WWDC 26, and we start with Swift. Now, if you call a throwing function inside the task but don't explicitly catch the error, you will get a warning from the compiler letting you know that this error will be ignored. I had previously made a video to raise awareness to the fact that in this situation, it's indeed super easy to ignore an error without even realizing it, so I'm quite happy to see that now there's gonna be a warning by default. Next, if you use different levels of visibilities for the properties of a struct, you will now get different member-wise initializers, one for each level of visibility when the compiler is indeed able to generate such an initializer. You probably remember that last year Apple aligned the version numbers for iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, macOS, and visionOS. I think I got all of them. And this year we benefit from it because there's a new blanket statement, any Apple OS, that we can use whenever we want to restrict a method or a type to a given version. We don't need to explicitly make the list of all Apple OSs. Back to the topic of compiler warnings, if a method is generating warnings that you're okay to ignore for now, you now have a new @diagnose attribute that you can use to silence warnings on a specific method. So you don't need to do it at the scale of the whole project. You can do it much more precisely at the scale of a single method. And it also works the other way around. You can enable warnings for a specific method, and you can also, for a specific method, ask warnings to be treated as errors. And last one for Swift, there's a new operator called the module selector, so this : operator, and it allows us to disambiguate situations where, up until now, the syntax that we had wasn't powerful enough to let the compiler decide which overload of a method or of a type should be used. Here you can see an example of this operator being used. Be careful though, the goal of this operator is to solve ambiguities that up until now couldn't be solved, or when writing generated code, so think about macros to make this code more sturdy. However, you definitely don't want to be designing your code in a way that would force you to use this operator too often. That would be a really bad anti-pattern. Now we move to what's new in SwiftUI. Last year, there was a lot of controversy around liquid glass maybe having too much transparency to be readable. This year, users will be in control of how much transparency they want liquid glass to have. It's a setting that you see when you first start your device on iOS 27. So keep in mind that from now on, there isn't a single amount of transparency. It's like an accessibility settings you have to design for all options. On iPadOS, apps have gained a new inactive state, making it easier for the user to understand at a glance which app is currently in focus. And as you can see in the code example, this inactive state is fully customizable. SwiftUI previews now support dynamically resizing your views, and we can imagine that this feature is linked to a potential iPhone Fold coming soon. Tab bar elements have gained a new prominent role that allows you to highlight a particularly important feature of your app, like here a shopping cart. Toolbar items can now declare a visibility priority that will be used whenever there isn't enough space to display all of the items to decide which ones should be hidden first. Once again, it's hard not to see this feature being linked to a potential iPhone Fold coming soon. And when there's a toolbar item that must not only always be shown but be easily accessible by the user, like a share button, there's now a specific role, top bar pin trailing, to make sure that this is exactly what happens. If you've ever tried to implement drag and drop in a UI, you probably know how tricky it can be and how you need to handle a lot of edge cases. Good news is that in the new version of SwiftUI, this is handled out of the box. You just need to call reorderable on every item that can be moved, and then a reorder container on the container with some details of how the reordering should be implemented. Similarly, swipe actions like swipe to delete used to be only supported on lists on SwiftUI, which was quite limiting, but from now on, they can be used on any container view. You just need to call the swipe actions container modifier on the container to enable the feature. Another welcome change is that async image finally handles a cache and won't be reloading the image from scratch every time that it needs to display it again on screen. AddState has also been reworked to be more performant when used on a property that stores an instance of an @observable class. Up until now, whenever the view got recreated, a new instance of the class would have to be instantiated and then immediately discarded. This won't be the case from now on. Apple also claimed that the compiler is unable to type check this expression in reasonable time inside the body of a view should be a thing of the past because they've reworked the way that views are built under the hood in order to give more hints to the compiler. I guess we'll see over the coming months whether this claim actually holds or not. And finally, let's talk about agentic coding. One of the big difficulties when you're using a coding agent with SwiftUI is that SwiftUI has evolved a lot over the years, and so the agent might not know by default what's the best way to write SwiftUI code. The good news is that Xcode 27 ships with skills that will tell the agent exactly that. And an even better news is that these skills are not hidden at all. There's a terminal command that you can use to export the skills. It's useful if you want to read them out of curiosity, but it's also useful if you want to re-import the skills into another tool like Codex or Cloud Code. And personally, I'm very happy to see that Apple isn't trying to force us to stay inside Xcode, but instead seems to be open with developers using third-party tools. And that's all for this video. These are the main new features of Swift and SwiftUI that I think will benefit most iOS developers. The slides I showed you came from these two WWDC sessions, and I still recommend that you give them a look, because there are a few more niche additions that I didn't mention, but that will maybe make a lot of sense for you. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss the next ones. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.